gradually you will come to a personal tipping point, and the thinking of gratitude will morph into feeling gratitude. Do it last thing at night before you go to bed. First thing in the morning when you get up, don't go immediately to the space of, oh my God, there's too much to do and I don't have enough time to do it all. The point though is you can't drop desires. Let's say you're a heavy smoker. You can't drop the desire for smoking. Perhaps by an effort of will, you can prevent yourself from the physical act of smoking. But every time somebody lights up in your presence, the thought goes, gee, it would be wonderful if I could have a smoke. Now, think about this, Greg. Whenever anything happens, anything, you immediately stick a label on it. This is good or this is bad. Nothing is neutral, either slightly good or slightly bad. You immediately put a label on it, okay? So, in a very real sense, your entire life is a meditation. And when you do that, you will find not only are you more effective, but things are getting done better, and there is joy coming into your life.
Hi, I'm Greg Voisen, the host of Inside Personal Growth, and it gives me a great pleasure to introduce to you one of our sponsors today, Thais Gibson from the Personal Development School. Now, your personal attachment style is one of the most powerful forces in your life. It shapes your relationship, your self-worth, and your beliefs. What if you had the power to become securely attached? You'd be able to build stronger connections and heal any relationship. Attachment expert Thais Gibson from the Personal Development School has pioneered a transformative, practical approach that will change your relationships forever. The first step, discovering your own attachment style. The free attachment style quiz at the Personal Development School, you can take it in less than 5 minutes and you'll get a personalized report with insights about your patterns, your beliefs, and the next steps to make real change. Don't miss out. Check the show notes below for the link and start your journey today. Welcome back to Inside Personal Growth. This is Greg Voisen, the host of Inside Personal Growth. And I have somebody that I've known for a very, very long time on the other end of the phone, and I should say on this Zoom call, and Dr. Srikumar Rao. And Srikumar, where are you joining us from? You Pennsylvania?
No, from Long Island, New York, Greg.
Long Island, New York. And this is the book we're going to focus on today, even though it's out of focus for me. Modern Wisdom, Ancient Roots. We're going to be talking about that. We're also going to be talking about Srikumar's coaching practice and his, I'm just going to say his institute, the Rao Institute. And for all of you listening, you can go to learn more about him at the Rao Institute. But I'm going to tell him a bit about you. I'm really honored to have you back on again. He's been on the show 2 other times, and he is a world-renowned speaker, coach, and thought leaders whose teachings have really transformed the lives of thousands of people worldwide. He's the creator of the acclaimed Creativity and Personal Mastery course, which has been taught at some of the world's leading business schools. Today, as I said, we're going to dive into this book, and which is a guide that distills timeless philosophical teachings into practical wisdom for navigating today's challenges. Dr. Rao's work blends Eastern philosophy, mindfulness, and modern psychology to help individuals find joy and purpose and resilience in their personal and professional lives. So, Dr. Rao, let's get going. We really got a lot here to talk about, and I don't want to waste my time talking with your introduction, but more importantly, you speaking about how you help people and how you serve people and how you can best coach people, but more importantly, the concepts which are actually articulated in this book as well. So, this book combines, as you said, this ancient philosophical wisdom with modern insights. And you have three predecessor books that you've written, of which two you've been on my podcast before for, and we're going to put links in the blog for our listeners to go to there. What really inspired you to merge these two worlds? I mean, we're living in such a fast paced world today that hopefully you get people to slow down enough to look at the philosophical side. And how do they complement each other in today's fast paced world?
That is an excellent question, Greg. So, let me tell you that it's all part of my personal journey. Uh, I've I finished my PhD at Columbia Business School and joined the corporate world, and my career took off like a rocket. At the ripe age of 22, I was head of corporate research for Warner Communications, reporting directly to the president. So, heady, heady days. I got burnt out by corporate politics and said, let me go into universities where there is no politics and everybody is imbued with a quest for pure knowledge. I was sadly mistaken. Politics is alive and well in academia. By the time I discovered that, I'd already made the transition. And for many years, I was a university professor and not very happy about it. My friends and colleagues who remained in the corporate world went on to great success and financial well being. And, I was stuck as a university professor. And I remember feeling quite down about it, you know. I had such a brilliant career, and I threw it all away. Woe is me. All my life, I'd been doing a lot of reading, spiritual biography, mystical autobiography. They would take me to a wonderful place. And I came back to the real world, and it sucked. And I remember thinking, if all of this is useful only if you're sitting quietly thinking peaceful thoughts, but not when you came to the hurly-burly, that is useless. But somehow I knew that wasn't true. I knew that this was very valuable. I just hadn't figured out how to make use of it.
What are some of those works that you studied early on philosophically? I think our listeners might want to know. And I know, by the way, they can go to your website and download the manifesto. So if they really want to hear more about this, the manifesto, which by the way, folks, is an amazing document providing you with a list of readings of everything that you would be taught in the creativity and mastery course, right?
Absolutely. Thank you for mentioning that thing. So, yes, I will also. I read the works of all of the leaders of major wisdom traditions. Uh,
So
Christianity,
Judaism, uh, Hinduism, all of that.
Buddhism, Taoism, Confucianism, Baha'i, Islam, Christianity. I read many, many of the works of the Christian mystics.
And when you came out from reading all of that, Sikamar, what was this main thing that crystallized inside of you that you realized?
Two things crystallized inside me, Sir Greg. One, the kingdom of heaven is within us and we can enter it now. All of the traditions have their own way of telling you exactly that. It is possible for you to live a life where you are radiantly alive, where you feel as if you're not walking but floating joyously through the air. Your blood is singing at the thought of being who you are and doing what you do. That state, it's it's not wishful thinking. It's possible. And it's possible for each one of us to be there. And we do not have to get anything to experience this. That is what is called the kingdom of heaven. That is what is called nirvana. That is awakening. That is brahmagyana. Different.
Is that the merger of all things, like Satori experience? I had Ken Wilber on here just about 2 months ago, and you know Ken Wilber. He's very articulate and philosophical. But when you take the psychological models along with the philosophical models and put them together, he comes up with what he is calling Well, you're calling it an awakening, right? And he's using the same term. I think when people become awake to everything and all of us are all connected and we're all one, and true that we are part of everything as well. Yeah.
Exactly correct. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Now, that's a mental model that some people might have a hard time adjusting to. So, you emphasize the power of these mental models in shaping our lives. Can you explain the what mental models are and how altering them leads to a profound personal transformation?
Certainly I can. But before I do that, let me make one correction, Greg. Everything that we're going to be talking about are mental models. But what you articulated about oneness, we're all one, that is not a mental model. That is the way things are.
That's the T, that's the truth.
That is the truth. Yes.
But some
Look at
people don't
mental
believe
model.
but some people don't believe that.
That is where you have to experience it for yourself. Because here's where the distinction comes in, Greg. Most of the time, what happens is we try to understand it. We say, oh, everything is one. That's a mental model. So let me understand where it's coming from. You can never understand it because what happens, Greg, is that this feeling of unity is something that is beyond thought, it is beyond cognition. You cannot understand it, but you can be it. And when you get there, you notice you've always been there, and all thoughts and questions drop away. So anything that you can question, anything that you try to understand is in the realm of cognition. It creates a duality. There is me, and there is this thing, and I'm trying to understand this thing. But the kingdom of heaven is where duality drops. There
Right.
is no me, there is no you, there is only it, whatever it is, and it's all part of the it. So that one thing is not a mental model, everything else is a mental model.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because I was reflecting on an interview not that long ago, and it was with Wilbur, where we were talking about how when Freud originally wrote, the translator was the one who changed it, right? So when he said ego or I, as it was it, as you just said. And, we've now come along as identifying this other element of ourself as ego, right? Um, and it really was either the I or the it,
Mhm.
right? And I think that's what you're saying is we get to this point of radical awareness,
Mhm.
right? Because it is kind of a radical trip to think I am one with everything, and it's very spiritual. Um, and as you said, it isn't a mental model. It just is. It
Yes,
you when you have the experience, it is, right?
correct. Yes.
Yes, yes, yes. So let me tell you, let's ask this. You talk about the if then trap. Okay. You discuss if then models of happiness. If something happens, I will be happy. If I marry the right person or I have the big house in the car, I'm going to be happy. Um, this has been an age old misunderstanding for a long time because happiness is an inside job. Why do so many people fall into that trap? And how can they escape from it to live more fulfilling lives? Because it's a common trap.
It's a universal trap.
Right.
Virtually everyone. Well, there's a number of reasons for that. The most important is programming. You've been programmed from a very young age to go out and get things, and you get things in order to achieve, and you achieve because when you do, you are fulfilled, you are happy. and everybody around you is doing the same thing. And somebody's got a big mansion and a private plane, and you automatically accord respect to that person because he has a big mansion and a private plane. So we're so programmed into it that it never occurs to us that the model is faulty. When we find that we get there and we're not happy, we think we put the wrong thing on the if side of the equation. What I have to do is put the right thing on the if side of the equation, and then I'll be happy. I thought if I was a department chair, I would be happy. I now recognize that I need to be CEO. So I strive to be a CEO. Now, this is programming. Everybody around us is doing the same thing. Media is reinforcing that in us in spades. So we don't question. When I was teaching at London Business School, I had all my students do an experiment. I said, go back 10 years. And 10 years back, you were a bundle of wants, just as you are today. So consult your old diaries, talk to your parents, talk to friends who knew you at that time, and as accurately as you can, make a list of the things you wanted at that time. And odds are pretty good that a majority of the things you wanted at that time, you have now. What effect has it had on your well being? Are you appreciably better off than you were? And when people did the experiment, they said, I did get most of the things that I wanted. And no, I'm not significantly better off. I just want different things now. That is the start of the awakening process, Greg. When you realize that all of this stuff that you want is transitory, it will bring you a thrill. You'll be overjoyed for an hour, a day, a week, and then it simply becomes part of the background of your life. You got a brand new Beamer. Oh, you're thrilled. You show it off. Within a month, it's just part of your life, and you don't give it another thought.
And it's absolutely true because those material possessions bring a short term, what do you want to call it, release of endorphins into your system. Yeah, the long term comes from your internal happiness and your ability to give. And that brings me to gratitude. You know, it cultivating gratitude, keeping a gratitude journal, whatever it is that you do, waking up in the morning and saying, I'm grateful for today because today is another new day that I can make a difference in somebody's lives. That's a good place. So, what would you say from somebody who's been teaching a course in uh, creativity and mastery to cultivate this gratitude, and how can they do it? And how can this gratitude change their personal and professional life?
Oh, thank you for asking that question, Greg. And let me tell you that these days, everybody talks about gratitude and how wonderful it is, and you have to, cultivate it. And frequently they do mention gratitude journal, and sometimes they break it down into think about three great things that happened to you today that you're grateful for, and so on. And I certainly advocate all of these. But many people report, I tried gratitude and it just doesn't work for me. And the reason for that, actually, Greg, is very simple. Most of the people who are going to be listening to this podcast are left brain creatures living in their minds. And when you're a left brain creature living in your mind, there is a tendency to think gratitude rather than feel gratitude. It's simply one more to do on your long list of things.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't work. You can't go good health check, food to eat check, roof overhead check. It doesn't work that way. You can't think gratitude. You actually have to experience gratitude. So, how do you go from thinking gratitude to experiencing gratitude? You work at it, you tie them together. For example, because you don't have to worry about whether you're going to have dinner tomorrow, you have a bed to sleep in, you have a roof over your head, therefore, you get a good night's sleep. And when you have a good night's sleep, the next day, one of your clients calls you and he has a problem. and you can devote all your faculties to helping him resolve his problem. And he's grateful, and therefore he compensates you. And that's what you use to maintain your standard of living. So it's all interconnected. Because you have something, you can do something else which gives you relief. So if you continuously observe how these things are tied together, and you spend your emotional energy in recognizing this, gradually you will come to a personal tipping point, and the thinking of gratitude will morph into feeling gratitude. Do it last thing at night before you go to bed. First thing in the morning when you get up, don't go immediately to the space of, oh my God, there's too much to do and I don't have enough time to do it all. Bring up that feeling of gratitude, bathe in it, shower in it, marinate in it, soak in it.
Hmm.
And when you do that, and if you get to the default emotional domain of appreciation, gratitude, you'll find that you're not nervous, you're not scared, you're not anxious, you're not worried. The two cannot coexist.
I think, Dr. Rao, a lot of people must wonder that you just mentioned this 5 minutes ago. It's like, okay, if I'm going to go meditate and sit in a cave for 3 or 4 years to be able to reach this state, they'll go, I don't have that kind of time. And I think that this state of, and you speak about this in this illusion of freedom, right? And I know that people use the word pretty liberally, freedom. We look at the freedoms that we have in this country, the freedoms that may be disappearing. But more importantly to most of us is just our own personal freedom. So we're not chained down, or we're not dragging extra baggage. So you challenge the traditional notions of freedom in the book. What does true freedom mean in your estimation? And how might someone out there listening today achieve a mental, emotional, and spiritual state of freedom?
Excellent question, Craig. Let's talk about freedom. We're big on freedom. We want to be able to do whatever we want to do. We want the right to bear firearms. We want the right for abortion. We want the right to live where we want, do what we do. But whenever we talk about freedom, we're always talking about our ability to do something outside. Okay? Now, here's a simple exercise that I ask my students to do. Sit in an armchair quietly for a half hour. You're not allowed to look at your to-do list. You're not allowed to go off on a sexual daydream. You're not allowed to think about what you're going to do at work. Just sit quietly for a half hour. Most people can't even do 5 minutes. Greg. So tell me, if you can't sit quietly by yourself for 5 minutes, how free are you? Look at the number of people who turn on the television, who turn on the idiot box, not because there's something they really want to see, but because they need to distract this demon that's between their ears and always pressuring them to do that. If you cannot quiet that horse, that wild, untamed horse, how free are you really?
Yeah, they think that it is the pattern that people get into, whether it's listening to the news, reading the news on social media, reading it on your iPad or your iPhone or whatever it my Android device. I'll give everybody credit.
Yeah.
Um, it's an addiction, and we know that.
Mhm.
It's the same addiction that you have to food, certain kinds of food. Okay,
Mhm.
and it's a challenge to overcome the addiction. Now, I find, even if it's a small practice of meditation, the monkey mind's going to come up and jump in there and tell you got a zillion things to do. And but what happens is the mind will slow down, and this is just advice for everybody, as you create a practice out of this. Like you're saying, sit in the easy chair for, if you can't for half an hour, sit for 5 minutes initially, and keep doing the 5 minutes until you get to 10 and then 15 and 20 and whatever it is that you would like for the freedom. Now, what you do know, and you know this because of your practice of meditation and mindfulness, is you will get to a state of freedom. You'll get to a state where you realize that all of these to dos that you have aren't so important. And this brings me to overcoming the mental chatter. You describe mental chatter as a significant barrier to inner peace. What are the practical steps that people can take to quiet this cacophony that they've got going on? That's, I know in one case, we used to use a thing called the brain dump. We'd write everything down and put it on a piece of paper and put it to the side, saying, look, we'll get to that when we get to it. And I find that it works. Do you have any cute little techniques like that that help?
That is a good beginning step, Greg. The most powerful method of coming to terms with your mental chatter is to observe it, Greg. Mental chatter is like clouds in the sky. You go for a walk, you look up, there are clouds in the sky. You come back from the walk, you look up, there are clouds in the sky. The original clouds have gone and there are new clouds. Mental chatter is like that. It's not a problem. The problem is not mental chatter. The problem is that you identify with your mental chatter. You become your mental chatter. And when you become your mental chatter, it grabs you by the throat and takes you to all kinds of places you don't want to go.
Mm-hmm.
So, the most powerful single method that I use to help people cope with mental chatter is observe your mental chatter. Describe it in the third person. Greg is sitting down in his chair. Greg is angry. Greg had someone charge him a huge sum of money for something which he had not even ordered, and he will now have to spend an hour or more combating it, and he's really pissed off. Describe it in the third person as if it was happening to somebody else. And when you become the observer of your mental chatter, you no longer are your mental chatter, and its ability to take you to dark places is severely curtailed. Keep doing that, and eventually you'll be permanently ensconced in the observer phase, and then mental chatter will not be a problem for you.
Yeah, I think you've actually put yourself as the observer. You're above it. We used to say in our spiritual psychology class, if a video was following you during the day and you played the video back at the end of the night, would you like what you saw? And I think the reality is those actions, those things that happen during the day, you can learn a lot by being an observer, by being the
Yes,
person who not actually ran the camera, but then watched the video after the video was done. And I think there's a lot of habits and or behaviors that people have that they would change. Now, this brings me to this Buddhist philosophy around pain and suffering. It's always been said that we're all going to have pain. We're going to have pains from certain things all along, but it's really how we relate to the suffering. We don't have to accept the suffering associated with the pain.
correct.
So in your book, you talk about navigating pain and growth. You say pain and struggle are often seen negatively. How do you propose we view them as opportunities for growth and transformation versus suffering?
The key, Greg, is to recognize that every time you have pain, I'm talking about psychological pain, not physical pain. Every time you suffer pain, there is an attachment in there somewhere. There is a very strong desire perhaps a desire system which is not being satisfied, and that is the cause for your pain. The moment you recognize that and you identify the strong attachment, the desire that is at the root of the pain, that is the first step towards dropping it.
How do you realize? So let's assume somebody has an emotional pain.
Mhm.
How do they realize their attachment to that? I think it becomes so blurry for people that it's hard to realize that there maybe was something that happened last week, last month, or last year, or 10 years ago that's actually affecting their emotional well being, their physical well being, because then that emotional turns into people having physical pain as well, right? How do they detach from that thing that potentially happened and has irritated them for 10 years, okay, to really understand that that's what it was,
Okay.
right?
The short answer, Greg, is you cannot detach from it.
Okay.
But here is the wondrous part of it. When you truly understand it, it drops. Many people say, from the Buddha's teachings or the Vedantic teachings from India, that desire is at the root of all your suffering. So drop desires and you'll be fine. The point, though, is you can't drop desires. Let's say you're a heavy smoker. You can't drop the desire for smoking. Perhaps by an effort of will, you can prevent yourself from the physical act of smoking. But every time somebody lights up in your presence, the thought goes, gee, it would be wonderful if I could have a smoke.
Mm.
You cannot drop desire. Desire has to drop you. And how and when will desire drop you? Desire will drop you when you have a clear understanding of the many ways in which you are suffering because of that desire. Let me give you an example. One of the more powerful teachings of the Buddha is the parable of the second arrow. The Buddha asked Ananda, his favorite student, Ananda, if an arrow were to hit you in the arm, would it not be very painful? Ananda nodded his head. Yes, Lord, it would be very painful. And if a second arrow would hit you exactly where this first arrow hit you, would it not be even more painful? And Ananda nodded, yes, Lord, it would be even more painful. And then the Buddha asked a surprising question. Why then do you shoot the second arrow? Now that sounds confusing, so let me explain by means of a story. There was this woman who was attractive and successful, and she had a very messy divorce. It took her a long time to recover from that messy divorce. But gradually, in bits and pieces, she put her life together again and decided she was ready to explore. So she went to all the internet sites and filled in her profile. And she came across this entrepreneur who was very successful, very witty, a handsome guy. And most of all, he seemed really into her. So after a few weeks of WhatsApping and talking the phone, they decided to meet at an upscale Manhattan cafe. And she was all excited and she bought a new dress. And they met. And 15 minutes into the meeting, the guy gets up, throws his napkin on the table, says, I'm not interested, and walks out. And she was crushed. She was so crushed that the only thing she could do was call her friend. And her friend said, why are you surprised? You have fat hips. You've got nothing interesting to say. Why would a handsome, intelligent man pay any attention to you? Now, you're shocked that a friend would say something to her like that at this juncture, correct? But you'd be less shocked if I said it wasn't what her friend told her, it's what she told herself.
Mm.
That is the second arrow. And the second arrow is always delivered by means of mental chatter. This is the key. The second arrow is always delivered by means of mental chatter. Being stood up, being rejected is painful enough. Does it make things better to tell yourself that you're physically unattractive and socially maladroit? Of course not. But we do it all the time. For most of my students and my coaching clients, if I could get them to stop at the second arrow, they'd be way ahead of the game. At the time they realize what's happened, they're on their fifth, seventh, or 399th arrows.
Right. And that's the whole.
Nice that you're shooting that. You know, Mark Twain said something which was very funny, but very profound. He said, I have suffered a great many tragedies, most of which never happened.
Mm, yeah, I think we live in our own world of making stuff up, and then we start to believe what we made up, and then we live what we made up. So
Exactly.
that's the illusion of the world in which we do. Now, easy for me to put into a sentence, a little more difficult for people to di- dissect the sentence and say, okay, that's what I've been doing, because it's almost like the Maya, right? I mean, if you believe in this Maya, and again, I'm using a, Eastern philosophy term from Paramahansa Yogananda and all the great teachers out there, because I've been studying that for years. But that is the Maya. That is the illusion
Yes.
that we live in, and to remove yourself from it does take this sense of peace, freedom, meditation, understanding where you are, and giving yourself time and credit for really what you've accomplished. I think I look back at an interview not that long ago with Marshall Goldsmith, like you, who basically coaches some of the most successful people in the world, and it's never enough.
Mhm.
You know, is it 50 million you got to have, or is it a billion you've got to have, or is it five or six cars you got to have? Is it how many degrees do you have to have? You've got 18 degrees now. And the reality is you just don't know when to stop because you are programmed that way or were programmed that way.
Yes.
Yeah, yes. And so you do have to take out the floppy drive and reprogram because that's it, which brings me um, to your what you call resilience through mindset. Okay. So how does changing our perspective about adversity prepare us to deal with inevitable life challenges really more effectively? Because you had mentioned just a minute ago, it's really all about the way we look at our world. It's about the way we emote in our world. Um, how can I effectively change my viewpoint or my view of the world in which I'm living? And how might you tell somebody to actually elevate above the physical into more of a spiritual place, to look at their world and say, "Oh, I see what's happening. I'm looking down on all these little things that I'm doing," and get an awareness from that. Not just, "Oh, I'm looking at it," but to have the awareness that that's really what's happening.
Let me tell you an old Sufi tale, Greg.
Okay.
Many versions of it. I like the one I'm about to narrate to you. There was a man and his son, and they lived in a beautiful valley, and they were very happy, but they were also dirt poor. And the man got sick and tired of being dirt poor. He decided he wanted to become a rich man, and he decided he would become a rich man by breeding and selling horses. He bought a stallion. Didn't have enough money to buy a stallion, so he borrowed heavily from the neighbors. And the very day he got the stallion, it kicked the top bar loose from the paddock where he housed it and ran away. And all the neighbors came around and said, "You were going to become a rich man. You snapped, run away, and you still owe us money. You are screwed." And the man shrugged his shoulder and said, "Good thing, bad thing, who knows?" That stallion fell in with a group of wild horses which were close to where he lived, and he was able to entice them into the paddock, which he had repaired so escape was no longer possible. And all of a sudden, he had the wild horse back, plus a dozen other horses, which, by the standards of that village, made him a wealthy man. And the neighbors came around and said, "We thought you were destitute, but fortune has smiled upon you. How wonderful!" And he shrugged his shoulders and said, "Good thing, bad thing, who knows?" The man and his son started to break the horses so they could sell them on the market. And one of the horses threw the man's son and stomped on his leg, and it broke and it healed crooked. And the neighbors came around saying, "He was such a fine young lad, and now we'll never be able to find a girl to marry him. How sad." And the man shrugged his shoulders and said, "Good thing, bad thing, who knows?" That summer, the king of the country declared war on neighboring country, and press gangs moved through the villages, rounding up all the able-bodied young men to serve in the army. But this man's son was spared because he had a crooked leg, and the neighbors had tears in their eyes as they rolled around. "So we don't know if you'll ever see your son's alive again, but you still have your son with you. How lucky you are." And he shrugged and said, "Good thing, bad thing, who knows?" And it goes on like that forever. Now think about this, Greg. Whenever anything happens, anything, you immediately stick a label on it. This is good or this is bad. Nothing is neutral. Either slightly good or slightly bad. You immediately put a label on it. Okay. Now let me ask you, have anything ever happened in your life that at the time it happened, you thought this is bad? But looking back upon it now, you can say, hey, that wasn't so bad, or maybe even it was a good thing. Most people can recall many such instances. I remember I was speaking before the Global Executive Summit of the Entrepreneurs Organization, and somebody in the back insisted on being heard. And he said, "Professor Rao, I have the exact example for you." He was a graduate from one of the top engineering colleges in India, one of the IITs. He got a master's in Stanford, was offered a job with a high tech company. His friends got jobs with other high tech companies and is looking forward, they were all looking forward to building their careers and carrying their friendship. But he had an immigration problem as a result of which he had to leave the country. Hired an immigration lawyer, tried to fight it, lost, and he had to leave. Among other things, he had student debt. And when you have student debt in dollars and you're earning in rupees, not a very good place to be in. But he said, "Professor Rao, because I was forced out of the country, I met this wonderful lady who's now my wife. I teamed up with a couple of my engineering school buddies and we started a company and it's going great guns. All my clients are in America. I come to America at least 6 times a year. I'm living a picture perfect life. And none of this would have happened if I hadn't been forced out." So if something happened to you in the past, that at the time it happened, you thought this is terrible, but you can now look back and say, hey, that wasn't bad. Maybe it was pretty good. Is it possible that what you're today about to label bad, is it possible that in X years it could turn out to be fantastic? Just asking yourself that question will move you to a different emotion domain. And if you then ask the next question, is there anything I can proactively do to actually make it good? And you move seamlessly from the realm of despair to the realm of possibility. Do not stick labels on anything. This is good, this is bad. Simply stick a label, this happened. And when you do that, you will find that nothing ever faces you. You don't go down. You, you just don't.
Good thing, bad thing, who knows? I like it.
Correct.
I really do like that story, and that's the power of storytelling. And you have lots of stories in this book. Just for my listeners, that's one that you just heard, which is a great story. Um, and I find that it's perspective, right? So actually shifting our perspective, and I'm not telling people to put rose-colored glasses on. What I'm saying is that when you shift or you change, as you've said here, the mental model, our world changes, meaning
Yes.
our whole world changes. And you have a section about balancing inner with the outer world. And the listeners might want to know, how they can integrate. Now, we've been talking about how to balance inner and outer almost through the whole show, because the reality is if we work on our emotional self, our spiritual self, our psychological self, even our physical self, this is all one, and it all interrelates, mind, body, spirit, right?
Yes.
How can we integrate this inner growth with the demands of the external responsibilities? And this is the key, because responsibility is broken down as our ability to respond. Responsibility. Do we have ability to respond? And I think in this fast-paced world, as you've said, it was one of my first questions. It appears that it's always so fast, especially today.
Yes.
Advent of technology and all the toys that we have to stay on all the time. Um, how do I manage that better? And how do I meet the demands of the modern world's responsibilities? Because I think that brings overwhelm to a lot of people.
Correct.
Okay. There's two parts to it, Greg. One is, and this is important, is to recognize that the hurry is in your head.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, there are more tasks that you have to do, but the feeling of overwhelm, the feeling of, oh my God, I'm completely swarmed, that is in your head. Everybody is given the same 24 hours each day. A serial killer doesn't get any less. A realized sage doesn't get any more. We each have the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So you can cultivate an inner peace, and I have a visualization for that. Look at an hourglass and see the sand trickling from the bulb above to the bulb below. Each grain of sand passes through a narrow neck, and it's the only grain of sand passing through the narrow neck at that time. That grain of sand is the task at hand. Pour all of your emotional energy into that. Do what you have to do it with a clear mind and complete focus. Don't think about all the grains of sand that are in the bulb above, which have to pass through the deck. They will pass through in their time. You focus all of your attention on that one grain of sand, that one task at hand. And if you do that, you will find that you get a lot more done than you ever thought possible. And most importantly, you get it done without a feeling of stress, without a feeling of tension.
Yeah, I think what you say is oh, sage wisdom about focus. In other words, learning to focus and remove the distractions, right? Because those distractions are energy suckers. They
Yes.
suck energy out of us. And in the end, um, you know, I know that it's about managing our energy, and people get what happens is this energy gets stuck in these chakras, and then it starts to present itself in different ways, meaning pain in the back, pain in the neck, pain in the side, pain in the leg, whatever it might be, but it's a pain. It usually is a physical pain. And I think to keep the energy moving requires, as you've said, this focus. And what I'd like you to do is kind of summarize for our listeners. And I want to encourage everyone who's listening out there. I have chosen to work with Dr. Rao on this coaching program that he's got. And I want to mention this again because the website is therawinstitute.com. And there you can download that, what I'm going to call manifesto on the creativity and mastery. That will give you an idea of kind of, and this is a kind of my way to speak about you, Dr. Rao's philosophy, Who is he? What does he teach us? You've heard on this podcast so far what he can teach you and how he can move you to change your life for the positive and for you to have forward progress toward your goals and your aspirations in a more meaningful and harmonious way. And I think the key is the harmonious way, so that it's not that you're not going to be productive. You're going to have productive harmony, as I call it. So you can literally still be productive and engaged in life, but you can do it from a world which is, you're looking at the world differently, from different eyes. So, if you would sum up what you'd like people to take away from this book and maybe the three others, but the reality is, and how what you'd like to leave them with relation to the creativity and personal mastery course.
Okay, I'd like to say, Greg, that you'll not just be productive, you'll be more productive than you ever were or you ever dreamed you could be. And in addition to being more productive, you'll find that there is more genuine joy in your life. If I were to ask you, are you happy? Most people would say yes. But they're setting the bar very low. What they're really saying is there's nothing actively bothering me right now, and there's some things in my life that I'm looking forward to. Maybe a new Netflix thriller, maybe dinner with a friend or vacation, something like that. That's not what I'm talking about. Do you really go through life radiantly alive? Do you feel as if you are floating in the air, touching ground every couple of 100 yards or so? Are you filled with such gratitude that you think that your heart is going to burst? That is your real nature, and that is achievable. And by the way, you're already there. You don't have to get anything to be in this state. You have to release it in there.
I think that's the most important thing.
You have to you're already there. You just have to you have to get rid of the obstructions that prevent you from realizing that this is your nature. And the key to that, Greg, is constant remembrance. People say, I can meditate 10 minutes a day, but that's all because I got a busy life. My friend, it's when you have a busy life that you need to meditate. Your entire life has to be a meditation. You have to have this thought current going on all the time. But the wonderful part is that this does not, let me repeat that. This does not prevent you from doing all of the things that you need to do as an executive, as a father, as a spouse. You can do all of that and at the same time be meditating. How do you do that? You set up a thought current in your head which is constantly going. If you're a man of faith, you can use prayer. Use the Jesus prayer or any of the prayers in the wisdom tradition you belong to. If you're atheistic, agnostic, just remember that the universe is acting through you. You are an instrument, you're not the doer. And how do you do that? By constantly remembering it. And the wonderful part of it is it's the learnable skill for you to keep doing that even as you're doing what you're doing. It's like driving a car. You can be having a perfectly wonderful conversation with your passenger, but you're still driving the car. So, what if something that you're doing, you're driving the car, but you have this undercurrent that you set up that is constantly going. So, in a very real sense, your entire life is a meditation. And when you do that, you will find not only are you more effective, but things are getting done better and there is joy coming into your life.
Well, I can tell you, and for my listeners, that this book could be a fire starter for you. In other words, it could start you on this path. And the most important thing is, and I just want to emphasize this to my listeners, go to the raoinstitute.com. We'll have a link. check out that manifesto, Creativity and Personal Mastery. Check out Dr. Rao's other books as well, because this is a great person for you to start with personally, to actually, if you can do it, to have him coach you. And he has a coaching program, and you can talk to him personally about that. But Dr. Rao, you are certainly, I'm just going to say, one of the uh, elders and sages who's bringing huge amounts of wisdom to people, from both sides, both from a spiritual side, from an emotional side, and an intellectual side. And I think when you put it all together, it provides people a new roadmap, a new way to look at the world. And thank you for being on Inside Personal Growth and spending, this last 50 minutes with my listeners, speaking about your book, your philosophy, and truly about your creativity and mastery course. And again, I want to remind my listeners, just go check out that website, please. Thank you so much. Namaste to you. Thanks for being on Inside Personal Growth and sharing some of your insights and your wisdom.
Namaste to you, Greg. It has been a true pleasure being on your show.
Thank you for listening to this podcast on Inside Personal Growth. We appreciate your support. And for more information about new podcasts, please go to InsidePersonalGrowth.com or any of your favorite channels to listen to our podcast. Thanks again, and have a wonderful day.